Hi, welcome to Expand Your Us. I'm so glad that you joined me this week to hear some thoughts on our intersectional identities and how they impact our ability to grieve. Last month, our government tried to help us remember and mourn the over 700,000 Americans who lost their lives to COVID-19. They did so by creating a visual space that captured the magnitude of our grief. They placed small white flags on the National Mall, one flag for every person lost. It was stunning, terrible. Our world is groaning under the weight of relentless uncertainty, layered on top of griefs known and likely unknown. Many of us, in America at least, have lived through years of instability in the institutions or identities that we have trusted and still trust. In the Bible, there is a record of weeping prophets who lead the people in lament. God, in God's infinite wisdom and compassion, designed us to worship and lament. We were not made to only see sunshine and roses, but were made to fall on our knees, crying out in anger or confusion for comfort. All is welcome in the kingdom of God. Freud's concept of melancholia explains that when we don't bear witness to our grief, when our conscious selves refuse to process loss, grief moves into our unconscious, and this shoving down of grief can force a break. I think of it as a fracturing of my soul. We try to break off the parts that hurt so we don't have to wade through the pain. In order to grieve well, we have to be honest about what hurts. And that's what I'm hoping to help us do this week. Understanding our identities and bearing witness to all the intersections therein can help us do this. The concept of intersectionality, coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, helps us understand the ways our various identities overlap and intersect, impacting our experience of oppression, exclusion, or abuse. An unhomed white male experiences the world differently than an unhomed, non-English speaking female. It is helpful to keep all of our identities not in silos, but to explore how they intersect, thereby shaping our experience of the world. So this week, I'd like to invite you to explore the layers of grief that are embedded in your own experience, in your various identities. People who often experience life from the margins are hurting, and people who often experience life from the center of power are hurting too. Take a moment to think about all the ways that you encounter the world. Does your identity feel shaken? In which ways does it do that? Do you sense a break within? Where do you feel disoriented? Understanding the intersectional nature of ourselves and of our experience of the world can help us grieve what we have lost and might still be losing. And for me, understanding the ways that my various intersecting identities have sort of layered on these parts of grief that I don't even know how to quantify, understanding that can bring me to some self-compassion for me. And it can also remind me that every person I encounter has their own layers of grief in their intersecting identities that they're struggling with as well. So think about it. I'm going to give us a couple of identities and possible griefs that could be sort of buried into those identities. And by naming all of them, I don't mean to equate them. I'm not suggesting they're all the same, or that they're all just, or that they're all fair. But nevertheless, these are some of the experiences that I think some of us might be having. For politically oriented people, the last few years have been absolute tumult. If you lean Democrat, then you watched Obama leave office, forced to confront the short half-life of legislative achievements and the tension between honoring diverse perspectives and the failure of delivery that posture sometimes ensures. If you lean Republican, you've watched your party morph and change in exhilarating ways, and you have found yourself confused by the animosity you sense from others because of either your continued allegiance or because of your need to depart. You might not understand why others assume you are the bad guy all of a sudden, and you feel you shouldn't have to work so hard not to offend people. For women, the last few years have exposed so much of our hidden realities in our relationships with men. We feel liberated to talk about it and wiped out from the constant burden to discuss and process every situation. For men, many feel attacked and find the need to reevaluate their instincts in every interaction exhausting. They feel accused, scared to trust what used to feel so normal to them. For those in healthcare, the burden of providing empathetic care while under-resourced and overworked, the proximity to death, the daily frustrations of wearing PPE have led to burnout and grief. Given the ubiquity of vaccines, they now have the added burden of treating patients who abdicated their duty to protect themselves and others, while also demanding life-saving treatment from the people whose lives their actions are putting at direct risk. For people of color, a slew of public murders have heightened your sense of danger in public spaces. You are undone by your own inner need to investigate your surroundings. While mostly white spaces ask you to demonstrate you are one of the good ones, you are constantly doing your own calculations for survival. Will this police officer know how to check her implicit bias? Will the unrecognized power of white supremacy threaten the safety of your child in this space? Who is trustworthy here? These questions never stop, and the chronic asking destroys your ability to be present in a space without a hypervigilant sense of double consciousness. If you identify as an educator, you are depleted and defeated, finding a new low that you aren't sure you can sustain. You navigate parents or students who are angry about masks on all sides. You work under administrators who protect your safety by taking political hits, which makes you feel terrible, or who increase your exposure to dangerous environments, which also makes you feel terrible. You teach in a mask every day, struggling to connect with students whose faces you may not be able to fully see. You often have to cover for colleagues on time that should be yours or off or office hours or time to prepare, and your ability to stay prepared or caught up seems to have vanished. Even if you experience the magic of collaborative learning some days, 5 to 20% of your students are out each day, and you constantly have to balance the progress you want to make with your class with the remediation that is necessary. So these are just a handful of hundreds of identities. And I hope that in lifting these up, they will inspire reflection into the tiny griefs each one of us has held these past few years. There is room here to lament, to explore, to wonder about how you carry your story. I hope that you'll take the time to think about your own identities. Where do you belong? Where do you sort of identify as your key parts of yourselves? And how have those things been shaken? Is there any grief there that you need to consider? None of us are just one thing. And sometimes we need to widen our view to explore all our identities and how they intersect. In doing so, my hope is that we find compassion for ourselves and compassion for others. When you see the weight, when you witness the grief, compassion has to follow. As your capacity to mourn your own sadness grows, your capacity to resonate with and care for others grows too. Self-compassion can help you expand your us as you remember all the suffering around you. May we go and be more kind to ourselves and to others. Have a great week.